So we're now recording, and it's my pleasure we really don't have to introduce them, Helen and Doug Frances. You all know, and they will be speaking on where social justice and spirituality connect. And so Doug and Helen, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us today. And I want to thank everyone for being here with us. This morning, we are going to talk a little bit about outreach and how it has enriched us spiritually. What is outreach, and how does it enrich us spiritually? The dictionary defines outreach as the extent or length of reaching out, and also reach further than. Let me repeat that. The extent or length of reaching out, reach further than. What does that mean to us as Christians? There are small acts of outreach every day, acts of kindness, smiling at a stranger, opening a door, sending an email or card to someone who is ill or sad, keeping in touch and letting people know they are not alone. And of course, prayer, praying for others and the world. Outreach can be a variety of things, and I have it on good authority that not all of us have to be Mother Teresa. Then it gets a little bigger. We start reaching further out. My favorite personal outreach is a ministry called Compassion. Perhaps some of you have heard of this. Doug and I sponsor Wilson. He is an 8-year-old boy, and he lives in Rwanda. Wilson wants to be a doctor when he grows up. Our sponsorship enables Wilson to attend school, have nutritious meals, and learn about the grace of God. With our help, his family now has a goat, a new roof, a kitchen, and a bathroom. And by the way, I have several pictures of the goat. Our first gift to Wilson was a mattress, so he no longer had to sleep on the ground. Best of all, we exchanged letters and pictures. It is both joyful and humbling to us to hear about his life and his deep faith. We are truly blessed to be a part of that. Reaching further now. I have been a member of the Grants and Outreach Committee for about 7 years and chair for the last 4. Through St. Boniface, Doug and I have been enriched spiritually by participating in outreach events, and we've done it alongside all of you. The parishioners of our church have packaged over 80,000 meals for Rise Against Hunger over the past 5 years. Some of the meals were distributed here in the United States after devastating hurricanes, while others were sent to impoverished countries around the world. Because of COVID, we were unable to hold an in-person event at the beginning of 2020. So we donated the money raised by our congregation, which was over $8,500, to buy the rice and nutrients. And the Boy Scouts packaged 20,000 meals for Rise Against Hunger, bringing our total donations to 100,000 meals. I think we can all feel pretty good about outreach like that. All Faiths Food Bank is another outreach to which many of us donate our time and our money. Let me talk to you about one event at the food bank where we all work together to unload and sort several thousand pounds of frozen meats. And I know some of you were there when we did that. This meat was distributed to the hungry. We completely emptied the freezer that day, and we set a record. That was a great day. This is putting our faith to work in a joyful way. The goal of the Grants and Outreach Committee is to strive to help smaller ministries where our grants will make the biggest impact. Our target is children, homelessness, and hunger. These three things were voted by our congregation as being the most important. We look to help local ministries, but our goal reaches as far as Africa with solar lights, and to Haiti, where we help to fund schools for children. It is by lifting others that we lift ourselves. James chapter 2, verse 17 says, "So faith itself, if it has no works, is dead." If you really want to put your faith to work, find joy in giving and spreading God's love through outreach. Becoming more aware of the needs of others and finding ways to reach further than has enriched me spiritually and brought me closer to God and to the teachings of Jesus, who said, "Love one another." It is as simple and as complicated as that. I thank you, and I'm going to turn you over to Doug.
Now you see why we fought like cats and dogs. I fought like cats and dogs to go first. Who would go first? It's a pleasure to look at this screen because I think that there's a connection that I feel, and I'm sure Helen's the same way, with every one of you over the years that we've been together at St. Boniface, I think almost 20 years. I'd like to first do a little bit of a disclaimer. You're going to hear some redundancy in our thoughts. It's really difficult to remain unique after living with a person for 57 years and have some unique thoughts, especially when you were born and then you got married. And that's what happened with Helen and I. Helen's a tough act to follow when you talk about outreach. She lives it nearly every day. I see her writing cards to people. I see her making phone calls to folks. And I see what she does with the outreach committee and how she reaches out almost on a daily basis to somebody. So I'd like to share a little bit of a snapshot of my background and to help you understand my transformation, and I use that word with respect with you folks, from the light to the dark, back to the light again. I grew up with a strong faith. As an adolescent, I felt God's presence with me almost every day. I would talk to him, sharing my most inner thoughts, and I felt protected. And in a sense, I felt powerful that I could do anything I put my mind to. The dark period of my life came when one day at a very early age, I experienced a life-changing event at the hands of a dear friend and a spiritual leader. As a result, I lost my faith, and I lost my faith in God and professed to be an atheist. I don't know that I really knew what that meant, but it sounded like a good term at the time. I didn't darken the doors of a church for almost 40 years, and this was the dark part of my life, although I didn't see it as such at the time. I was self-centered. I was focused all of my energies on my work and my immediate family. Outreach in the form of helping others was never a priority, nor do I think it was even a consideration. My dark days made a turn toward the light when Richard and Cynthia Sand asked Helen and I to attend the service at St. Boniface. I really don't know why we did that, because it was the last thing I wanted to do. But since I had played tennis with Richard for some time, a couple of times a week, I felt it was an obligation. As I look back, I believe God was moving me back to where I belong. Being a part of St. Boniface congregation was a life changer and the beginning of my appreciation of doing for others. My first experience with outreach was when Andy Taylor asked me to be a chaperone at an upcoming youth trip. Now, that was the last thing I wanted to do when I heard you had to spend a week with teenagers sleeping on a bench in a high school. So I spent most of my time the next day or two thinking about how I was going to say no, but it didn't work out. I told Andy I would do it, but my experience with the youth trip for that week in Appalachia was life-changing. It was like God bringing me to a webinar to open my eyes to his work. I saw how the youth who were painting and building things for the residents brought love and caring and joy and prayer into the homes in which they were working. I saw the beauty of outreach. I saw how God's church in all denominations formed an outreach acumen in the youth attending these work camps. They came together every morning, they sang together, they prayed together, then they went out for the entire day to work on houses, and during that time they'd have lunch with the residents, they'd pray with the residents, and then at night come together and sing and pray together. I believe that week with the youth in the community that every resident that was affected felt more loved and more cared for. During our years at St. Boniface, we became very involved with the Family Promise Ministry, doing what we could to make families who were dealing with homelessness somewhat more comfortable as they searched for permanent housing. We would bring dinner, eat with them, and we would have friendly conversation with them and the children. We usually slept at church on Sunday nights to provide a safe environment in case they needed it. I must tell you, in getting an ever so small glimpse of what it's like not to have shelter for your family is a real eye-opener. That experience made such an impression on me that when I found out the organization was ready to fold, I asked to join what had become a 2-member board of trustees and no director. Most all the churches involved, with the exception of St. Boniface and a couple others, had dropped out of the organization. Although I don't know when God speaks to me, it was clear that I had to do all that I, in my power, could do to resurrect this organization. The power of Family Promise Ministry in reaching out to help those in desperate need, especially children with no home, was a treasure worth saving at all costs. It took almost 3 years, but now it has a strong board and a talented director. And although COVID-19 has changed the rotational model that provided hands-on support of each congregation, Family Promise of Sarasota is helping family after family retain their present shelter and is providing the everyday support these families need. Earlier this year, I felt a calling to leave Family Promise of Sarasota in the capable leadership of the board and the talented director and pursue a different type of outreach. I joined the board of trustees as treasurer at a startup church out of Newtown. Starting a church from the ground up, I assure you, is an exhilarating experience. You can almost see God's work forming his house of worship. It is a very small congregation, but everyone wants to help in some way with their time, talent, or treasure to make a spiritual home. I feel a sense of outreach in that I'm giving my time, talent, what little I have, and my treasure to help build this church. I was also asked to join the board of trustees, or the board of directors actually, as treasurer of the Sarasota Ministerial Association, and part of the leadership team of a subcommittee called HEART, HEAART, which stands for Hate Ends as All Rise Together. Our outreach is to develop and provide programs that are available to any organization, helping groups to recognize the heartbreak that comes from anti-Semitism and racism. This evening, we're also hosting the 20th commemoration of the 9/11 tragedy at the Sarasota National Cemetery. I see that as a powerful outreach. It's compassionately touching the hearts of those affected by this tragedy. Through both of these organizations, I feel my heart is filled with outreach, and in some way, some small way, I'm doing God's work in the community. In closing, I would like to share my beliefs in outreach in 3 thoughts. First of all, I believe that the church is a great teacher about outreach, and outreach is certainly the soul of the church. There is no greater force to bring Christ's compassion and comfort to those less fortunate. Secondly, outreach comes in many forms, as Helen has mentioned to you. It comes in your time, your talent, and your treasures given to one person or to several. That's outreach. And thirdly, connecting with others with kindness is a powerful outreach. The second week in November, by the way, will be World Kindness Day, and we at the Ministerial Association are formulating some action activities in which you can participate that will elevate kindness in our community. So when we look at the needs of others without putting our needs first, we are filling our lives with outreach. Without the church, I would have never understood this principle. Outreach truly is the soul of the church. So with that, Helen and I can open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Helen and Doug, so much for that presentation. It's wonderful to see all that God is doing in your life, that you were doing in the world's life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be the opportunity for people to raise their hands and ask a question or share a thought. So I'm waiting.
Steve, raise hand. Let's see.
Chris.
I don't see anyone else raising a hand at this
You may
point.
want to repeat it.
Yeah,
You may want to
Chris,
repeat the instructions on how to raise the hand. I see
Yeah.
people
Okay.
struggling.
Yeah, to do that, if you put your arrow, your cursor on your screen, you should see, if you're on a laptop, you'll see it on the bottom, a ribbon. And if you go over to reactions, it's showing a little smiling face, but you go over to reactions, click there. And at the bottom of that list of reactions, you'll see raise hand. And we do have a hand raised. Chris and Bill, go ahead.
Thank you. I was struck, Doug, by your comments about going to Appalachia with the youth group. I, for 10 years straight in Chicago, did that with our youth group. And ironically, it was my daughter, when she was a freshman in high school, that she was first eligible to go. And the history of going onto the Appalachia Service Project was that parents were not allowed to go. And this was an internal parish rule, which most of us who had younger children at that point thought was kind of silly. And we went to the sponsors and said, we should be able to go because it gives us a great opportunity to bond, not just with our kids, but our kids' friends. And that finally occurred. So I went on my daughter's first trip, freshman year in high school, and the only restriction was to that the parents could not be on the same team doing construction work as the as their child. But I also had deeper roots in that because I used to do that in Philadelphia as a high school kid, and going into Philadelphia on weekends with weekend work camps that were run by the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers being a very substantial part of outreach in Philadelphia. So I just comment on both of those things because they were really powerful, powerful times. In the first example of going to Appalachia, I went during a very tough time in my life, going through a divorce, and being able to do that with my daughter during that period of time really gave me blessings that far exceed the pain of sleeping on air mattresses with smelly adolescent boys. And I only say that because there was one place that we stayed that was bunk beds, and I think there were probably 16 or 18 boys and 2 adult men. And I remember waking up at about 3 in the morning and saying, I think I'm going to sleep outside.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. And Rick, you have your hand raised.
Yes,
Rick,
thank you,
you're
John.
on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about looking at outreach from an internal standpoint, and do we do enough in our congregation to reach out to our own parishioners? You know, we have a church where there are lots of elderly people,
Yes.
people that skip church because they have to stay home and take care of their significant other or spouse. And I'm wondering how you all think about that, about outreach internally.
Well, I know that Elisa during COVID called several key people to stay in touch with different groups of people. Maybe everyone got 4 names or so, and you were supposed to just check in on them and make sure everything was going okay with them. I'm sure they were lonely and needing to talk to someone from the church. Just a simple hi, that's all. And I don't know if we do enough. I know the knitting group, whenever someone is ill and they know about it, they send a prayer shawl to them. That's another thing that's done. And we also have the prayer group, but that has to go through the church, where we will call in and Betsy will send it out to the prayer group as to who would need prayers, and of course the healing mission. But you're right, Rick, I think we do need more internal outreach. I agree with you. I don't know how we go about setting that up, but maybe Betsy has some ideas.
Well,
Putting you on the spot, Betsy.
I can't officially raise my hand, so I'll just step in for a minute. Has St. Boniface ever had a Stevens ministry program?
Yes.
We have. That may be the time to revisit there, and that definitely is a pastoral care ministry generally set within the congregation itself that can be very effective in terms of reaching out and not just to those who are going through medical issues, but those who are lonely, just need someone to talk to, that kind of approach.
Mhm.
And we do have a hand raised. Betsy is responding, maybe. Go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you. I'm going to lower my hand before I forget.
I did it for you.
Helen did a great job of listing some of the things that we do, and most of our internal outreach, if that makes any sense, is pastoral in nature through the prayer shawl group, the prayer circle, healing mission. We have Eucharistic visitors that go take the Eucharist to people who cannot get out for whatever reason. We have a Stephen Minister program, and believe it or not, some of our, and it's been kind of been cyclically active for 20, 30 years. And sometimes the limitation of outreach is people being open to receiving it. So, and that's what I think we encounter a lot. You know, I'm strong, I'm independent, I'm okay. Those other people need help. So maybe part of outreach is knowing when to be vulnerable. But that said, even though I'm sunsetting, is if you all have ideas for internal outreach, you know my email address.
Thank you very much, Betsy. And Diane, you have your hand raised. You need to unmute. There you go.
After the killings at Sandy Hook, the Peace and Justice Committee met to say, what can we do? And so the entire Peace and Justice Committee became the first chapter of the Brady campaign in the state of Florida. And instead of fading after a few weeks, it has mushroomed. And so SarasotaBrady.org brings you in with our new head. She's wonderful, Carol Rosigno. And maybe some of you have seen us protesting out on where Tamiami by the kissing statue. Every Thursday we have people come and say, do you have a permit? And yes, we have a permit. And what we're trying to do is to raise awareness. And we have End Family Fire as part of what we do. It's a whole campaign to get parents to lock up their guns so that when kids visit each other, they don't accidentally or on purpose get into the guns to kill each other. And so our group has gone to all of the elementary and middle school with flyers, schools with flyers, talking in English and Spanish to try to encourage parents to lock up their guns. Now, when we demonstrate holding our signs, ban assault weapons and so on, we do get pushback from people driving by. And it's not always pleasant, but it's worthwhile. And so we're going to have our first meeting in November to talk about, do we feel safe demonstrating? But, you know, we've gone from a group of about 8 to, 20, 30, sometimes 40 people who show up. And then everyone has emails, and we write to Congress people with the action suggestions, action demands. And, I don't think Marco Rubio has ever written back to me, but he knows that I exist. So it's important to put our faith in action with trying to end gun violence.
Thank you, Diane. And Michael and Rita have their hand raised.
It's me this time. And I have actually a personal question for you too. For those of us who observe you in church, Doug and Helen are like syncopated rhythm. And so I'm wondering how you eased together into outreach, or did one have to sort of pull the other one along? I said it was personal.
Yeah, we pull each other along all the way and with just about everything. However, the first experience was the mission trip that Andy, we hadn't been going to church for very long, and she approached me with that. So that was kind of the start of it. But I'd have to say that with both of us, shortly after that, Family Promise became something we did together, and that we fell in love with, and that we saw the beauty of it and the necessity of it. So we pulled each other along with that and experienced that outreach together. And that was a great thing. That was one of our peaceful moments together. Yeah.
But Rita, I think what happens a lot of time, I'll be involved in something or Doug will be involved in something and we volunteer each other. You know, okay, Doug will do that. Okay, Helen will do that. So I think you're right. It is kind of a pulling along thing.
Right. Well, thank you. Amy, were you trying to raise your hand?
Yes, I did, and it disappeared again.
No.
Helen and Doug, can you tell us exactly, and I know I've heard a little bit about it, what Family Promise is doing during the COVID time when we can't have them housed in the different churches?
So that is Amy, in a sense, a heartbreaking situation, which COVID has been for all of us in many respects. But it did affect the original model of rotational through the different congregations.
Yeah.
We wondered at the time just how we were going to transform into something different to not drop out of the whole homeless scene. So what happened is we started to help people in their present situation. And most people, because of the forgiveness, the rent forgiveness thing, were in shelter, were in, apartments and things. So what we did is we supplied them with food and with supplies and with counseling and any kind of support that they needed. We got this support from the churches, I should say the congregations, because it's more than just church. But the community supported us by giving things to us, and then we turned it back to these folks that we had contact with. We happened to be very fortunate in hiring a director who had had a lot of experience with this sort of thing in the Northeast and had been with Family Promise for several years, but very successful. So she was very proactive in going after families in the community without having the rotational model being active.
Oh, good. I was wondering if maybe some who were already out of their homes had been put in motels, and if you were asking for people to help support them in that way too.
We have done that, Amy, and also I might say that what is the organization is Harvest House. Sorry about that. It happens, every year it gets even worse. But Harvest House has, they have taken people into their facility. When they let them go and put them into apartments, they don't do anything to supply the apartment. So they could go into an apartment that is completely bare, A to Z. And what we have done is incorporated our congregations to then supply the apartment with furniture, food, all of the things that they might need to get started. And this has been done so many times, it's gives me goosebumps. It's wonderful.
Good, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amy, for your question. And Mike has his hand raised. Mike?
Oh, I so love the Frances's presentation and all the involvement and questions and comments, because it shows how Boniface people are involved actively in the community. So I have to briefly just mention, sure, Boniface is a member along with 26 churches. I think 26 or thereabouts churches in Sarasota with sure, Sarasota United for Responsibility and Equity, and we are involved in, a lot of people, particularly often in the African American community, are find themselves in jail for petty offenses, nonviolent, in some cases even for not paying a traffic fine, which can be very steep, that they can't afford to pay, and so they go in jail, they lose the job, can't go to work, and it just spirals. So there has been some improvement and some work with the sheriff, the state attorney, and the city as well, and and changing some of those laws. So we're trying. It's a long haul, but I think we've showed some improvement thus far, and it's been a good good to be involved in that group. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike, for your question. Doug and Helen, a question for you, and that is, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Prayer leading into action or action leading into prayer? What are your thoughts?
My thought is, in my past work, I've always believed that doing the action helps you then to really believe in what you're doing. It's hard to give belief first because there's some resistance to that is very effective in the brain. So in my work life, we always had people do a task first and help them along with that, and then they became believers in the task. With prayer, it could be different because when you're dealing with God, there are different rules. And so I can only say that, that's my thought, that in order to get people to believe in something, like for example, when Dick and Cynthia invited us to church, I had no reason to go, did not want to go. But because, as I said, because they were our good friends, I did it out of obligation. So as I went day after day after day and spent time with Helen doing this prayer thing, eventually I became a different person, a believer. But it was only because I had to experience it first before I believed in it.
Sure, Helen.
Well, I'd like to give my thought, and I know that when Cynthia gave her presentation that she mentioned this. While going to St. Boniface in the beginning, I had been praying that God would show me something that I could do. And I bumped into Cynthia in the grocery store, and she said to me, "Would you like to come to the healing mission and sit with me and become a part?" And I thought, gee, I don't know, that's for me. So for me, it was prayer leading to action. That, my prayer was answered because the healing mission, I just have loved it so much and have been so blessed to be a part of it. So that was for me.
But I must add to that, Helen kept saying at home, "I'm not worthy to be a part of this. This is not something I'm worthy to be a part of." So I had to convince her there's probably nobody on the face of the earth more worthy to be a part of it than Helen.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, thank you very much for those thoughts. Appreciate it. Anyone else have thoughts or questions they want to share?
Grace is raising her hand.
Grace is waving. Because I'm recording in speaker view, so it's a better recording. I only see a few people. Grace, go ahead and share with us.
She can't get
Grace,
it off mute.
You may need to unmute.
Now, can you hear me?
There we go. Now you're on.
I just want to say on a very exuberant note that I'm sure many people watching and people in the church who have taken part in the 3 events and worthwhile endeavors that the both of you have set up and helped organize. The family promise I helped with, as many of you have, I helped with the dinners, got to know the people gently because we were, of course, informed on what our boundaries were with our guests. Did that and really enjoyed that. I'm so sorry it's not going on. The Rise Against Hunger was a wonderful event. Brought out so many people to it, and the All Faiths Food Bank. I was there for the frozen meat event, but the thing that it really is remarkable, and well, maybe not so remarkable, but so wonderful, is that we got to meet and mingle with our parishioners, with our members in a
Yes.
joyful, full-hearted way of giving and sharing. And, I just think you walked away from those making new friends, for one thing, spreading the word beyond St. Boniface. Oh, I took part in this wonderful thing. And if it's at your church, or, maybe you could come with me. So I think they're great outreach events, as well as being so worthwhile for the recipients. But I do want to say that one internal area or single person handedly is Doriel Boyce as our parish nurse. Doriel goes and visits people a lot. She's very quiet, very mindful, very prayerful. She doesn't blow her own horn, toot her own horn, or whatever. But I know she had been sitting with Margot Dickey lately, and she makes such a quiet presence, and she sends people little email notices out of the blue of encouragement and happiness. And she just does it. She's just a wonderful addition to our community. I just wanted to add that. Okay.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Grace.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I
that.
agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Sharing in a task is definitely a way of building community.
Yeah.
And I think, Grace, as you were saying, it's a way of bringing people into the St. Boniface community that might not be comfortable coming to an actual service, but when you can bring them into something social justice or support of communities out beyond our walls of the church, they're willing to become involved with that and then begin to develop relationships. And that can be a way of having them move into becoming more involved in the community of St. Boniface.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts?
Can I
Sure.
reaction, I just get emojis and it.
All right. You're on, go for it.
I just wanted to thank Helen and Doug. That was a wonderful presentation. And I was just wondering if with all the Afghanistan people coming, is there any outreach in that direction, or are Afghanistan's coming to Sarasota? Does anybody know anything about?
Yes, I believe that, and I saw a correspondence on this from Luz, is it Kuchera? Is that her last name? She is Unidos Now. It's an organization here in Sarasota. And evidently they are coordinating with different groups to take care of some Afghans that would be coming to this area, to Sarasota. I don't know a lot about it yet. I think it's in the beginning stages, but there is a movement to do that.
Oh, thank you, Doug.
Sure enough.
Keep me posted on it when I come.
Well, I'll find out more about it, and I will be able to do that after our ceremony tonight. There's been a lot to put together this commemoration of 9/11. And by the way, if you have not been out to the National Cemetery out 72, it is an amazing event, and it's an amazing place. It will touch your soul as soon as you get into the front gate. But it will be a beautiful service tonight, starting at 6 o'clock. All are welcome, and probably last for about an hour and a half. And the ceremony is going to be very touching. But I will keep you abreast of that. Of anything that
Thank you
comes
so much, Doug. I'll
Sure.
see you in a few months.
We'll look forward to it, Ann.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Ann.
And Cynthia, you have your hand raised. You need to unmute.
You're still on mute,
You need
Cynthia.
to unmute.
There we go. Sorry. Just want to thank you for an amazing presentation, you two. It was just beautifully done. Bravo.
Thank you,
And
Cynthia.
I'm just tremendously impacted by the fact that our simple invitations reaped such fruit in the Lord. I mean, when you think about that, I mean, this meeting Helen and I had in the grocery store, where we both go all the time and never see each other, we did that day, and I was in desperate need of help. And she responded. It was just a simple moment. And look what life has been brought to all the people that Helen has touched through her ministries. And the same with Richard inviting Doug. And I'm just kind of blown away by the pictures of what has transpired. It's amazing. So my takeaway here is speak up, invite. Who knows what will happen? No.
Right.
So,
Amen.
Thank you.
it's yeah, just beautiful stories of God's work.
Thanks to both.
Thank you.
Cynthia. And Vince and Betsy have their hand raised.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, Cynthia, that sometimes outreach can be as simple as an invitation. And it seems simple to us, but profound to others. I wanted to thank Doug and Helen too. You all are amazing. And if I can be so bold as to say, I think you all are the heart and soul of the church, what all you do for so many and so graciously. So thank you. And the different things you're opening our eyes to. Appreciate that.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Are any other thoughts? Donna, you're waving, or are you trying to raise your hand? She was waving. All right,
I'm just clapping.
there we go. All right.
I agree. I agree with Betsy, and it was a terrific presentation. And I'm so grateful to you, Doug and Helen, for sharing this with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you
invitation.
for having us.
Yep.
Yes. Any other thoughts before we close here? All right, then. Again, Doug, Helen, thank you so much. It's been terrific.
A pleasure,
Thank you,
John.
John. It was our
And
pleasure.
yourself.
We were honored to be a part of it.
And Michael, any words for the community here?
I'd like to reiterate what Cynthia said, because I think it's extremely important. And Betsy, echoed it, and I would like to echo it again. God works in wonderful, strange ways. And what happens is God is moving constantly in our lives, and we may not even notice it. Whereas somebody else can offer us a small invitation that, as Cynthia said, just blossoms. It's that whole image in scripture of the vine and the branches and the fruit that comes from letting God just be a part of our lives. And we don't have to always be conscious of that. I think we tend to think that, unless I'm really intentional about everything, God's not working. God's working constantly in our lives and moving us forward. So, Doug, in particular, I want to thank you for your faith sharing this morning. That really was powerful, because I think we all have gone from some type of light to darkness, back to light, back to darkness, to light again. And it constantly happens. And I just appreciate that you stated it so clearly, simply, and just let it be there. And that's wonderful. It truly is. And to everybody who's joined us today, your remarks have been just right on target. This has been a great exchange and great awareness of things that we can continue to help one another grow in our relationship with one another, with God, with the wider community in our church. So just really grateful to each one of you. The other thing I'd like to do is give Rick a moment to see if he, oh, is he off already? Oh, that's a shame. I was going to ask Rick to give us a small preview of next month since he's going to be on. But I would invite all of you to remember October 9th. Our educational offerings are the second Saturday of each month. And we just hope that, you will continue to be aware that they are available. And please invite a friend. We've learned today how a simple invitation can really start something that's incredible. And even if it isn't incredible, it's a small thing. Desmond Tutu used to say, do the small things well. And this is what we're invited to do. So thank you, one and all.
It looks like Rick Pereira's name is misspelled.
Okay, we'll check that. All right, anything else before we?
Well, it's just been such a message of hope and that God is working in our lives in subtle little ways. And thank you so much.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for being a part of this. We look forward to seeing you in October.
Love to all.
Thank you.
All right. Blessings, everyone.
Peace.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Why is it so big?